Okay. So here are a few points. I just think that Dr. Sana, you made a very kind introduction, and you said that I have to boast a bit about myself. So I can do that, but I won't. In fact, most of my life, since I am a professor of journalism, so I have done things that are not considered academic. Like I also worked as a journalist. I was head of the DW as Urdu service for a year. I didn't like it, and I came back to my university in Peshawar. My vice chancellor wanted me back. I just worked there for 10 months. So I have been doing things that are more important in my view for the field, and it's kind of running projects like independent project reporting with the GIZ project. And there was another project which is known as Voice for the Voiceless. So we were trying to instill understanding and awareness amongst uh, citizens for their rights, it's right to services, right to information, and things like that. I work in areas like journalism and trauma. When you work in conflict zones, what happens to you? And so, in my opinion, journalists are known, their work is known, but they are not. And that was also the beginning of my study when I went to Germany as a PhD student. My professor asked me, I was fortunate enough to be with somebody who was very well known in the field, a communication sociologist. How much time do we have? I just wanted to know, I just don't.
We have an hour, and we would like some 20 minutes at least. You could answer questions as you move along section to section.
Okay.
Or you could ask questions we could take questions at the end. They will be in the chat, and I can alert you to them. I'll take care of them.
Yeah, I think having questions at the end, there is one hand I can answer that question because it's right from the beginning, and then I'll be brief. I just don't go beyond 25 minutes. So
okay,
if there is a question, they can ask.
Yeah, I would like them to state them in the chat, and I will see if there are any in the chat.
So I won't be too long.
There aren't any.
No. I would like to leave enough time to questions if there are any.
Yeah.
And so there was this beginning, and I would like to state that because the question of being a heuristic question is very important to me. Like, what knowledge do we get out of it? And I remember when I already had taught for 9 years at the University of Peshawar. If you don't have any competition, you think that you are the best in the world. So since you have not seen others, so that was kind of my situation also. I was teaching at the university. I was the first gold medalist. I just got the job. This was new department. And I thought, I know everything. Nobody else could teach me anything. This happens to all the people who get into academia and start reading and think that this is the book that they read and nobody understood it as they do. Just a passing remark. And I heard my professor speaking and I said, I don't know any of this. And then, then when we were working on my design and he came to me and he said, you know what we have to do? So we have to develop a structure because what you are trying to do is trying to understand the working conditions of journalists. And you don't have an earlier study which has quantifiable profiles. So my advice would be to mix, as in German, they say, Empirie with theory. So you have to mix the empirical with the theoretical. So that means in that structure that you have to go for a mixed method of research. So you develop a quantitative profile, and then you go into detail that you understand the human situation. So most of the time, the human question for me is whether we try to understand a human situation or not, whether we want to have a profile that would just give us numbers. And honestly, I personally and many of my colleagues, other colleagues, are against reducing human beings into numbers, because we think that this is not the right way to do it. And so we always look for things that are mm, that are useful uh, for to represent research when it's a human research about to represent human beings. And that's the point, basically. That's what we do. So mm, what we call, most of the time we are in that box when we study. And I'm saying this based on my experience of 35 years of teaching, that most of the time when you are a student, you are doing a PhD or an MPhil, your supervisor also, if a student does a bad job, the supervisor is equally responsible or even more responsible, because supervisors should guide students. And I'm not blaming anything, but I'm just explaining a prevalent practice, especially in Pakistan, where supervisors give you jobs and advise you into an area which they specialize in, which is kind of fine, and also quick fixes that could get you a degree at the earliest. And at that time, we need to have uh, supervisors and a working environment which takes you out of the proverbial box. That you get out of it, and you you think as a theory-based practitioner, and you are more self-reflective, because that's the way to begin a research. And it's also kind of evaluative thinking process where you argue and then argue against yourself. That's the way to develop research questions, basically. And if you go into that process, you will really understand the weaknesses in your project. I think it's important that you see weaknesses in your work before others see it. You exhaust uh, critically analyzing and evaluating your work before other people do. Uh, the point is that the short-term purpose of your research might be to fulfill the requirement of an advanced degree. The larger and longer term purpose is to develop a mindset of inquiry, basically critical thinking. Like critical thinking begins quite early, but your research should show that you were critical of your own work. Uh, so the first thing is that these are the questions that we ask ourselves. What do you want to know? What will be the detailed quantitative, qualitative, and mixed method research questions that you hope to address? Because I think it's important why to use a mixed method research. As Dr. Rukhsana said, that my colleagues who spoke about qualitative and quantitative research already uh, said something about mixed method, because it's nothing new. It just happens all the time. But the question is, why would you use it? What do you want to get out of it? That's the most important question. Because for some people, it's fun having a mixed method research. You more people, and that shouldn't be the reason. Like the reason should be, what benefit would it be for the students, for research, what we call the body of knowledge, and what benefit would it give humanity? Humanity is kind of a word that we use very loosely, but it's very important that we should know that. And and data collection methods are very important, because some data collection methods seem like fun, but they are not. Like they are exhaustive. Like for example, if you mix, we will discuss that in a few minutes. But if you mix qualitative with quantitative, and you do a quantitative, and then you go into what we call participant observation, that's exhausting. Like you have to go somewhere and live there for a week or so and look how people live and then ask them questions. That's not easy. It's no fun at all. It's funny if you see it in a movie, or somebody has written in a book, but it's not. So, and the most important question is, for mixed method research, that how would you integrate data which is collected in two different ways, and at times they have different time spans. We'll discuss that also. So these are the few questions. Well, the rationale is quite easy. It's like if you mix qualitative and quantitative, you will have multiple perspectives. Validation becomes easier, because as we speak about it, and also comprehensive understanding, because you are going after the quantitative, which gives you a profile, and at the same time you are going after a qualitative, which gives you an in-depth understanding of what you are doing. And also, it's very good when if you, what we call the explanatory research patterns, where you do a quantitative one, and then you say, okay, now I want to delve deeper and try to understand the human situation. It's really useful. Like, you have statistical data, you know what people are saying, you know what they are thinking about something, and then you go deeper into qualitative methods, and you have a very deep understanding, which enriches your discussion and which really enriches your work. And if you publish it with a mixed method research, uh, the simple explanatory method would give you a lot of readers, basically, because people would like to know you have explained a human situation where humans are not just a number. And definitely you have better contextualized measures. So again, the same. Uh, I would just mention one thinker, and some of my colleagues in the West disagree when I say that, because they have their own big guns. So uh, it's Bourdieu, the French sociologist Bourdieu, who basically came up with why to do that. Like, he used to do research which is qualitative, but which was very strongly embedded in empirical research. So he thought, in his opinion, there was no theory without empirical evidence. Like, he did that wonderfully, and he explained a lot of human questions, human dilemmas through his research. I don't need to promote him; he's a very big name. But at times we say that when we why are we mixing those studies, those different ways of understanding a human situation as research is. So we see at it, we look at it basically, that the rationale between this, that it's the affective and the rational. So the affective means the emotional part of it. That's what Bourdieu used to do. He used to develop a rational profile of human situations, and then go deeper into understanding the affective ones. Like, let me state one problem, something that I work with. Like, journalists in Pakistan or everywhere around are feeling a lot of stress, and they are losing jobs or losing lives. So if we take how many journalists have lost their jobs in Lahore, for example, during the last 5 years, and we give them the numbers, and we say which newspapers or media organizations were these, for example, television, radio, newspapers. Most of these are television people who lost their job, like 300 people in one day, for example. So I know that that's the number. So that's basically the rational explanation. How are the if the question is, are what are journalists' working conditions in Pakistan? Let's take a case study of Lahore, big city, one of the biggest media centers. And how would we measure that? Say, okay, if journalists are losing jobs in a certain number, meaning the working conditions are not good. That's the hypothesis behind that. And we say, okay, 300 people lost their job in one day. That's huge. We have numbers. But then we say, how how did that losing their job affect their lives? So, what were the problems their families faced? I just don't want to go into a somber area, but a few committed suicide. It happened in Lahore. A photographer committed suicide, and you go and you want to understand, why did losing a job drive somebody to taking their lives, and you delve deeper, you are delving into the affective area, you are trying to understand the human situation, the loss that somebody went through. You are interviewing parents, you are interviewing kids, you are interviewing colleagues, and you are trying to understand what brings it to that level, and you are using a mixed method of research. And that's how that's the last thing. It's not just mixing the two, it's very purposive, and it answers a certain questions. And I just wanted to point out the four main areas where we work. We can have a debate after that, but I just don't want to lose sight of that, talking about being professorial about the problem and not giving the right way. The convergent parallel design is the most common one, where you collect data, quantitative and qualitative data at the same time. This is what I work with most of the time. I try to collect data, uh, qualitative and quantitative data at the same time. The good thing about it is that you don't have that time lapse, which really makes results questionable when you get into a discussion, because the first question that will come to you is that you had a quantitative profile working and you had a qualitative profile working. These were 2 months apart. Doesn't the world change? It's a very valid question. You avoid that question. You avoid that question by what we call having a parallel design, where you go into the field, you distribute questionnaires whatever way you want to, and then at the same time you interview people or do focus group discussions or do participant observation. So the best thing that comes out of it is that you get you avoid the questions and the trouble. It's less time consuming, but when you look at doing both the jobs at the same time, it's very difficult to manage. Like, it's a compressed time frame in which you might not be able to get the job done well. So for this, as Herbert Blumer always used his book, Symbolic Interactionism, which is basically uh, a collection of 7 of his lectures, says that if you want to go into a field, you have to exhaust existing literature and develop a very strong plan for field research. If you don't have that, don't go in. But once you reach there, and that's very important when you are mixing methods, you should be submitting to the dictates of the field. At times you have a plan which is perfect, it is book perfect. Keep in mind that you have a plan when you are doing research and that looks perfect. Keep in mind it's other people's work that looks perfect. It's not yours. Your work will begin when you implement that. And that's only yours. That population is yours. That question is yours. You are localizing something that was not done before. That's the question of novelty in every research. And also, I should also advise students. I'm not challenging professors, but I'm just telling students, if there are any, that you have to localize any study you have. Any research done in the West or India or South America, we might find many parallels and many similarities with South America. And we would, when you look at it, you say, this is my story. India and Bangladesh and Sri Lanka has this effect always, especially in journalism. But keep in mind, this is not yours. It's theirs. Yours have to be localized, and that's the point where you do literature review along with some reflective reflection. You say, okay, I am reading this book, but what's the actual situation? uh, it it brings me to one of the areas which is not given here, which is there. The second one, the embedded design. The embedded design basically does what it does. You have a quantitative thing working or a qualitative thing working, but you are inserting the other one into it. Like, for example, you have a quantitative research at work and you are doing it and you embed interviews. Why do you embed those? Because you want to localize it. You don't have any data because nobody has done that work before you. You are borrowing methods from others because they have already done it. These are valid. So what you do is that you do embedded research. In embedded research, most of the time, in a quantitative study, you do qualitative interviews. You get in. Why are you doing that? Because you are furnishing and you are validating your work or rejecting some parts of it. And that's the point where we get into what we call the grounded theory. The grounded theory says, okay, I collect data, but I'll redesign and keep redesigning my instrument according to the needs of the field. So that's the point, that whenever you use whatever you use, you have to keep in mind either you localize it or you keep a space for it to localize it. Adjusting instruments is not what we most of the time do, but it's very important. The embedded design, I already told you about. The most common ones, which are easier to do, difficult to, especially the explanatory one, difficult to defend. The explanatory one is the one where you go for a quantitative research. So you use the quantitative instrument and you have the data and you give a cursory look at the data and you say, okay, these are the questions that need further explanation. So you get into an explanatory research and you say, okay, let's ask people questions. Let's ask them, what does that mean? So it's more like getting into the grounded frame, basically. And that's why when we do mixed method research, we are more into paradigm building and theories building than in simply doing qualitative or quantitative, because theory building is not kind of Einstein stuff. It's just when you use more than one theory and then you localize them, you are building your own theory. It's the theory that somebody had, but you are localizing it. Most of the time when you use the word theory building, somebody would think that they have to build a new theory, kind of like Einstein built the bomb, or E is equal to mc square. That's not that difficult. Like normally students, research students, when they use more than one theories and make a connection with them between those theories, and so they are developing a paradigm, and that paradigm is theirs. It's not somebody else's. It doesn't mean that you are announcing a new theory, but what you are doing is that you are localizing more than one theories. So in explanatory sequential research, basically you have quantitative data at hand and you see the results. You don't analyze them. Don't do that. Some people say, okay, I have the whole analysis and here it is, and now I'll do qualitative. No, you have missed the point, because your time frame for both the analysis is different. So keep in mind that you read the data, you get some questions, you use them as qualitative instruments. You decide what to do. You decide. Most of the people do interviews, because if you are having a mixed research, going into participant observation is a difficult ask. Although I must say it's very interesting, but because you have a good profile of people, you have read data, and then you have used it, and then like for example, a community in Lahore, you would like to have uh, like water shortage in Lahore's slums, for example. I don't know where the slums are, but there are always in every. So you have a quantitative result, and you have it, and you know how they look, you know how life is. It's different than the studies you have read, or it's similar to that. And you say, okay, let's go in and do some participant observation, live in that area for 7 days, ask people questions, get your notes. Well, it works well. And when you have both the data, naturally you do write your report. The exploratory is the other way around. It's you do qualitative research and you see, okay, this is qualitative research, which is in depth, but there are some areas that need validation. And that validation comes to quantitative profiles, bigger samples. Numbers help, basically text or word, basically. Your statements are supported by the numbers you get. Uh, it's a very good thing, but at times explanatory sequential research brings you different results than you had in qualitative research. It also depends upon if you're doing quantitative first and qualitative after that. It's easier in the sense, it's not easier, but it's better in the sense that you have all the questionnaires filled and you have answers, and you would never know whether people lied when they were answering your questions. And this brings me to a very important point, where when you are developing your questionnaire for quantitative research, and it's very important that it's pre-tested. And it's pre-tested in another population where you are going to do research. Keep in mind, uh, university students are the best guinea pigs in this area. You pre-test it upon them and you give them the data. But if you are doing the research on the same people, as you are testing on, it might be misguiding because there is a bias that already exists in the instrument. So the exploratory sequential research is having qualitative data at first, and then most of the time it's done to validate qualitative research, especially if it's upon uh, area issues that are a bit controversial. I'll go back to Herbert Blumer, who in symbolic interactionism. So symbolic interactionism is based on George Herbert Mead's ideas uh, of of society in his book Mind, Self, and Society, which whose bases are that that's true that society acts upon the individual, but it's an interactionist relationship. Uh, Individuals also act upon the society. They bring in change through each and every action uh, they they have, and this change might not be visible, but it's consequential. It has consequences. So Bloomer, as a student of Mead, started the idea of getting into an understanding of of human groups that are not respected in society, like delinquents, uh, people who are in prison, and all these things. His point was that if these persons are shunned by the society because they have done some wrong, they are in prison, you don't like to talk to them, they are pariahs. So where does all this negativity come from? From the society. So we are telling the story of the dominant group, which is the society, but we are not getting the opinion of these people who are also part of the society. So society is partly responsible for their wrong. If society takes credit in the achievements and goodness of the people that they admire and mark as heroes, they should also take society should also take responsibility for their side of the story. And when you tell the story, and when you go into that and you interview these people and you get these qualitative data and they tell you this is what society did to us, like all sorts of stories, the society will naturally reject it. They'll say, okay, the dominant group is just fine. Why are these few people crying? And they are responsible for what they have done. Now, the point is, we go to back to, my apologies for being philosophical here. We go back to people like Foucault, who for the first time made it possible that society can be criticized and society can be investigated. Society is open to investigate. It's not sacrosanct. And because earlier we used to say, before these people, we used to say, okay, society is perfect. We make mistakes. But that was the beginning of this thought that, okay, no, society is not sacrosanct. Human institutions are fallible too, because they are human. And there are no gods and institutions. Religion may be. That's why religion is not easy to investigate. There are many studies which tell, is it possible to do research on religion? And they said, that's not possible. Because if there is a question, no, you can't get into that. You can't do research. So the point here is that when we get into areas where we have qualitative data, which might not be in consonance with social norms and mores, we need some support. And at that time, exploratory sequential research, in which is one of the rare areas of mixed method research, becomes very important. Not many people use it because people say, I have done qualitative research, that's it. I'll take a smaller sample. I won't do a big one, like case studies. Most of the time, mixed research is case studies, especially when it's qualitative. So they say, okay, I have done qualitative research. I'll get a few of these samples which validate my work, and the work is done. But we can have bigger samples. It needs a lot of effort. It 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 takes a lot of toll on researchers basically, and I think it's very difficult when you are doing your MPhil. Don't I or PhDs even, because it's a larger uh, structure at place. But if somebody wants to get a grip on the art of doing research, mixed method research are good. And I think there is this. I'll just end it on this one. I think I've spoken a lot. So here is the point, the last point that I would like. That mixed method research, the first and foremost question that you should ask: why should I do that? Why should I go into using two studies? My answer to myself most of the time is that I need a quantitative study. Most of the time I do convergent. Uh, and my question is that since there are areas that are not well explored, and also if you get a global sample and localize it, having a quantitative profile is good. It gives you an understanding, a general understanding of something. But then I would like to, like in my own opinion, I would like to humanize the data. And when I decide to humanize data, I say, okay, let's go to people, let's ask questions. But these questions should be very much connected to your original research questions. Uh, it's very important that if you have research questions, both your both parts of your design, your instrument are directly connected to it. If you don't connect to it, because it happens, I'm saying is because it happens. Students have a survey in mind, and they have their research questions stuck with the survey. And then they have a qualitative instrument, which is not connected to the research question. If it's not connected, you will have problems in your discussion area because you don't have any literature that is connected to your qualitative area. The same happens if your main thrust is a qualitative one, like you are going for a exploratory sequential research, and you say, okay, I'm going for that, and I have a qualitative structure, but I would like to have some validation. And then somebody will say, so what is the connection of your validation instrument with your research question? So my advice always is, if you want to go to qualitative, to a mixed methods research, you should decide it during your literature review. Start with the literature review earlier. Do literature review. And then if you think this is something which needs validation, like qualitative first, quantitative later, embedded, embedded it easy. You just, then I think it's very important that somewhere you mention something like grounded theory. Like, okay, I am going to modify my instrument in the light of embedded instruments that I am using. So somebody would ask, where did you mention it in the beginning? Nowhere. Why did you do that? And I have seen PhD researchers defending their dissertation, not being able to answer their question, looking at their supervisor, who will just look other ways. They'll say, okay, we are not responsible at that time. So that's very important, that even in an embedded design, it's there and it's easier, just one line. I'll use grounded theory to furnish my design. Simple. You do embedded, you make changes in questions, it will be accepted. So it's very important that these are connected to your research question, and your research questions should always be connected to your theory. Like most of the time, we misunderstand methodology as method, which is instrument. Like methodology is this convergence of theory with the method. They go together, which are connected to the research question. If these three things are rightly in place, the rest of the job is easy. If these don't have any connections, you will have difficulties. Forget about somebody asking questions when you are defending your dissertation, but when you are working, you will have to make certain moves which are not ethical. You will be avoiding questions, you will be spinning stuff. Believe me, if you have clarity at that very initial level, you won't be spinning anything. You will have data that will speak for itself. You will have a good discussion. You will have a good conclusion, and also something that will be useful for a community, for humanity at large, and also for the body of knowledge that we produce as researchers. I don't know if there's no more stats, right? I remembered it from the last time. Okay, thank you very much for your patience. If there are any questions, please do feel free to ask.
You were George on time, Altaf, and I think I learned a lot while you were talking, and I thought I knew some. There were some questions in the chat which I kept on answering. But just to sum up, what you have said is that we did what is a qualitative and quantitative research, and now we are talking about mixed methods. And why do we need to use them? And of course, you clarified very well that we need to use them depending on the purpose. And what do you want to find out? And that you have to do it early on while you're doing your literature review. You have to decide what are the research questions you really want to explore. The beautiful thing that you, two things that really hit me about your talk were that you were talking about, number one, a couple of things, that the pilot is compulsory, a lot of reflection is compulsory. Number two, a continuity in your methods that you use, irrespective you use them before or you use them after. Your sample should be from the same number of respondents either way. Your questions should be picked up or further elaborated from the answers that you already have. You cannot at any point introduce new substance or material into either of the methods. There should be a continuity, there should be a linkage, and there should be a credibility of what you've said first, and then follow it up with whatever you are doing later. There should be no incongruity. They should be totally consistent, aligned. And the last thing that you said was that whatever your purpose, it must serve the bigger humanity. I love that, of course. And it should serve, a new knowledge. You should bring out new knowledge. And I think those were very important points that we should remember. I've seen lots of researches that do not add substance to anything that we're doing, with just a lot of literature review and a bit of work, which does not go anywhere. And I have noticed, that it needs to be better aligned. I do see that there is a couple of questions. Can we imply mixed method research and religious studies? And yes, I said, of course, yes, you can. Why not have, no, mix religious studies and religious, uh, you know, uh, your text, not on the religious text, but on the religious studies, you can explore what are people thinking and how do they interpret. And I think there's a lot of research that does happen in interpretation done by scholars. And I think those things do happen where people talk about a certain text and they put up the context, they explain the context, and then their idea about it. But you shook your head, and I would love to hear about what you have to say.
Yeah, no. When I said that there is a wonderful paper that a friend of mine has written, and he's a professor of religious studies at the University of Chicago. So Lauren Lieberger, and I was asked to teach religion and media at Ohio University. So I told him. So he said, read this, and it was the question was not that. The question was whether religion could be subject to research and inquiry. The answer
Okay.
was that since there are many don'ts, you can't really go delve deeper into that.
Okay.
As far as as the use of mixed method research in religion, it's it's happening, and I'm not a religious scholar. I'm just journalism professor, but in Islam, the collection of the hadith was basically a process of research, and then and it was quite qualitative. It was quite a mixed method, if I may say, since there was a text which was there, and every Bukhari, Imam Bukhari, and so these two
And
books.
many others. Yeah.
Yeah. And these two books, these people went to the people who they knew had the saying, confirmed saying from the Prophet, peace be upon him. And they went there to collect the text and also take the context. So that's a very strong qualitative method to use, like travel that far, meet the person, get the information, and also confirm whether he's truthful or not from the community. So if we see it was always there. And also, my apologies if I always talk about Islam, because I have studies, Islamic studies, as so that's part of my earlier studies. So and also, if we look like the Encyclopedia of Islam and something books like that, which came out, like Al-Itqan fi Ulum al-Quran, which is considered to be an encyclopedia in those earlier times, were all results of research. And also the ownership of them by the Muslims and others, and of the Greeks heritage, which ended up in the libraries and all these new knowledge in Islam and in all religions. So yes, religious studies is very much using uh, methods of research. And if I may say, these are mixed methods, because there are quantitative data available, and then there are in-depth analyses. So all of these are there.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you. There's a Shahryar Khan. No, I think it's a student, and I think I have seen lots of students asking questions that are not shouldn't be asked here, but with apology, because we want to sort of talk to people who are serious and have done their background work on concept clarity and just want to advance further. But we are happy to answer your
Yes.
question, Shahab. Where should we talk about theory in quantitative study? Chapter 1, 2, and 3. I mean, it's like asking, totkas or asking for a nuska.
No,
And that's very sad.
yeah,
But
this is a
anyways,
very valid question, I must say. And I see these mistakes in MPhil and PhD researchers. Like, people say chapter 1 is introduction. And I say that's the last chapter you write, guys.
absolutely.
Because when you are finished with your work, you introduce it. How
Yeah.
can you write something? So I have seen, and I'm happy that this young man has asked this question, because it's a very serious question, in the sense that the structure of your study is, the first chapter is not the introduction. Yes, it chronologically comes first when your book gets published, but it's the last one you write, because in the introduction you write about how did you do this research. So, and many people fail to write that because they have written it in the beginning.
Yeah.
So I think there is no solid rule about that, I must say. But the work on theory, like the discussion on theory, comes before the method, like before the instrument.
Yeah.
There is also a question which somebody might not have asked, that when do you do literature review? You do literature review throughout your work.
Absolutely.
That's how you work. You begin with it, you end with it. Yeah, I hope it's useful.
I think that's no, but that's true. I think we covered a lot of it in earlier sessions. And his question, Shahryar, was, where should we talk about? He is writing about the structure. And I
Yeah,
think when he talks about the structure of writing, he says, where should we talk about theory in quantitative study? And I am like, if you mean theory by literature review, then of course it comes also very early, but like
well,
that
yes.
throughout
Yeah.
the session, because I remember when I did my research, PhD research, and what I learned was remarkable. My tutor in UK, he looked at my thesis and he said, Ruxana, do you know what is a very important finding that was not your purpose? And I said, I don't understand. At that time, I didn't have the grasp of, my mind really opened up after the PhD, because he
Yeah.
forced me to think critically. And I see lots of questions. And coming from Pakistan, we aren't used to that. Even as
Yeah,
gender is an impediment at that time, because they force us not to be critical thinkers, but just to be followers, meek followers. And so I
yeah.
have a lot of barriers to break to get there. But anyway, and I said, what? He said, do you know what would be your most strong paper out of this? And I have not done that. He said, your experience as a Muslim researcher doing research in a Muslim country, because I had quoted in my methodology how female researchers, especially in underdeveloped or Muslim countries, had a problem of doing in depth work, which I had done.
Yeah,
And
that's
he
very good.
said, and all the literature that and then you say that it is a part of everything that you do. Even in my methodology, where I was just trying to justify my method, I had to look up literature review to back up my method or not back up my method and say, okay, contrary to this or in keeping with this. And so there was a lot of literature review, and it actually proved that my experience was contrary to all what the Westerners had written about. And I was perhaps the only Muslim writing in a Muslim context, and all the other researchers had actually negative that women in a Muslim society, especially, is unable to get that. And I never wrote that paper, it's dated now. 40 years old, but I think he said that's your strongest paper. Write about it, Rukhsana. So there is a question that, when do you talk about theory? You're talking about it throughout in the literature review. And again, somebody has, Sumaira Akram, another MPhil scholar, asked, at the time of defense of Viva, do we have to defend our methodology or the conclusion that we draw out of it? And I am sorry, Sumaira, if you don't know what your Viva is about, it's about defending every line that you have
Yeah,
written.
no,
So it's not.
that is where I was saying that I am external examiner to at least 10 PhD researches every year. Like I do kind of one monthly or like something like that. And the moment you ask a question which is
Yeah,
where somebody has made a mistake, the supervisor is sitting right there, and they will just not look in you into the eye. The student will be looking at the supervisor, imploring to answer the question because they never discussed it, and the supervisor will just blame the student. So make sure that you have done your homework right. Yes, you have to answer every question. That's why I was saying that if you want to use embedded methods, and if you want to, why do you interview people during a quantitative? Because in the light of those interviews, you might change your instrument.
absolutely.
Now, here's another question. The Board of Academic Studies and Research, it's a very important body. Many students don't understand that. Any change in the project should be brought to the Board of Academic Studies and Research. Any change. Some universities allow only the change of title, but some universities say any change. Now the question is, that's why being cautious and also to avoid any problems, you state all. That's why I always ask students to develop paradigm. Use more than one theory. Every theory connected to the work you do, and also to the instrument. For example, the reason I say this is write a line about grounded theory, that I be using grounded theory because grounded theory allows you to change your instrument in the field, because the very premise of the grounded theory is that you collect data and then you decide what to do with it. You are not doing it, but you are just keeping yourself out of trouble by, as the lady said, if somebody asks you, why did you do that? You just go back and say, look, on the sixth page of my study, of my research, I have written I'll be using grounded theory. This is how it is defined. Good supervisors, intelligent supervisors will always give you that advice. There are a few things that are included into PhD dissertations or MPhil dissertations to avoid embarrassment at the stage of defense, because that's really bad. You shouldn't be going through that one.
Yeah, that's true. Okay, there's another from Nigeria, American University, Nigeria. I do not catch the name. Can you do mixed methods in law research? And then again, I thought that was, yeah,
Yeah, yeah. No, no. It's again. You have to understand the philosophy behind
concept.
it.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, you want to do. Let me give you a small example. Like you want to know how many convictions, like drunk driving convictions, for example, how many were there? 65. And then you say, like, why did they do that? The question why
Actually,
is
yeah,
basically is a mixed method. You want to do that. You want to say, okay, the number is 65 in 1 year on a specific road, and you say, why does it happen on that specific road? That question goes into a mixed method research. You are because this happens like in the US where I live. There were kind of when you were driving from Athens to Columbus, there was a point where there were a lot of traffic violation fines over speeding. The result was that people complained that they can't see the video camera, the, the speed camera. In the US, it's a rule that the speed camera, when you are fined, it should be visible. And then came a team of investigators and they say it's there, but you can't see it. They said drive through it. They couldn't see it. So the fines were dropped. See, so all these things, like the second aspect of coming in and investigating into it was a qualitative one. So yes, you
yeah,
can do that.
yeah, of course. Can you? I think it always comes down, Altaf, to the purpose that you are trying
Yeah,
to find out.
yeah, that's
Unless
true.
you have a clear purpose in your mind, I remember it is painful to actually come to a purpose of your research. I had to do, my tutor would send me to the library for 9 months. He would put red and he said, Ruxana, read more, you are not ready yet.
Yeah.
I couldn't, and he wouldn't explain why I wasn't ready, but he would
Yeah,
say,
that's right.
and put up a draft of what you want to do. After 9 months from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. in the library, I went crazy. So I know, but then suddenly, voila, there was that moment where I found the purpose and
Yeah,
everything just fell into place.
yeah,
It
that's
was
true.
like, this is what I have to find. This is the sample that I will be able, should be good sample. But I had to read a lot about sampling, about the literature on my discipline, about the survey instruments. My mind had to have a grip of everything that I was going to use. And only then I could use it properly. So it took me 9 months. So that's for those of you who are doing your research, that don't hurry up the initial process. That's the time everything comes together, and then you don't have confusion in between.
That's true.
So thank you. Books on research methodology, some good book for research methodology. I think there are lots out there from
Yeah,
UET, Mehran, University of, I think, Engineering and Technology in Mehran. Some books, Altaf, I'm
yeah.
sure not
I can
coming.
share some because
Yeah, if you can send
I'm
with your,
yeah,
we
yeah.
will send them with the email. Please, we will.
I'll share those because I'm teaching basically theory,
Hmm.
so these are kind of at hand. So I'll share.
Okay, from I think Maria from Namal, National University of Modern Language. Embedded and parallel design of research are somewhat similar, and that's a question.
Yeah,
I think that's a good
yeah.
one.
I
Yeah.
think no. It's like the difference between the two is that in the parallel convergent design, you have two separate
Yeah.
uh, data. Like you do both the researches at the same time, but you do a qualitative and you do a quantitative. Yeah, like you do quantitative and then follow up with in embedded one, it's the priority. The difference is the priority
Okay.
because in the convergent design, both are similarly important, one more than the other. In the embedded one, the one you embed is not that important. It supports the for example, most of the time it's done in quantitative research. So during quantitative research, you ask questions and you do interviews. So those interviews are there to furnish some information to help you in your quantitative study. They don't have an independent value at the same at a par with the convergent one, although they are important because they are part of the structure. So
Thank
that's
you.
the difference.
Yeah, thank you so much. Many are actually admiring the clarity and how you've been explaining some things, and that review
Thank
of
you.
literature happens throughout there. That's something that I think was very good. Mohammed Saleh from my English department here personally feel that the methodology section does not get the space and importance that it deserves in a research
Yeah.
project. Most people simply mention what they're doing and how they're doing it without elaborating much of the phenomena. If the methodology fails, then the research is not very good. And I think he's right in short
Very right.
papers, but I think when you write your thesis, MPhil or PhD, it is a substantial chapter by itself. But I think in research papers, people do not delve into too much detail. Is that so, Altaf?
Yeah, I remember when I submitted my PhD dissertation, and you have to submit it to the chairman of the PhD committee.
Yeah.
So I went there, and the staff told me I have a meeting on Wednesday. I have this problem of not knowing when the about I don't have much retention of information. I went on a Wednesday.
Oh,
And the lady said, I said, I'm here for the meeting. And she said, it's next Wednesday. She was angry. And then the chairman came out and it's you. He said, okay, come in. And he said, my apology. And he said, I have read it. And I said, you did? Yes. He said, and it's very refreshing to see that somebody has given ample time to build a theory and explain it. It's a common error globally that people refer to other studies and say
yeah.
this is the methodology. That's true. But how are you using it? What is the importance of this theory and the method connected to it, which is known as methodology to this study? People fail to explain it. And I again would say supervisors should be wary of the fact that their students are on a novel journey, which is of for them. The problem in Pakistan and many other parts of the world is that we don't understand the importance of higher research, like PhDs, especially, also MPhil, because this is a new addition to the body of knowledge, which should be very clear, not simply for the candidate, but for others who will come after them, because they will study and they will learn from it. And it's very important, as Saleh rightly mentioned, that you should explain why you are using this theory, what will come out of it, like like how is it important, what will be the importance of this work to the human body of knowledge? These are all questions to be answered in that part, in the methodology part, because the rest is not yours. You should keep in mind the rest is data, the rest is discussion upon data. Your work, basically, your personality can only be visible in that part, your own importance. Like it's not that you boast about yourself, but people should know that it's your work and it stands alone.
Absolutely. Gohar, you can launch the polling there towards the end before people leave. We still have 137 with us. Ruth says that I was able to complete my LLM work. And there was some questions, there was situation that you talked about how in certain cases, the requirements of the IRB or the body granting you the degree, you had to satisfy certain technical constraints and the topic, or sometimes instead I had to do that, change my topic, and I got my degree. So she's just citing an experience, and it was a good one. Nice to know, Aruj. I took a new topic, good for you, but as, and as there is no literature to review in Pakistan, I was the pioneer. Good work. Then the civil rights protection under consumer protection laws. There is a question from Sahiwal. CUI, I always forget. Experimental in social sciences is categorized or qualitative or quantitative.
Experiment.
And
I
experiment
sorry. What does experimental mean? Honestly,
yeah, yeah.
yeah,
I
yeah.
was not.
I think it's a
You're
natural
talking
science
about
question.
empirical. Probably she's
Empirical.
talking about empirical collection.
Okay.
Fine.
Yeah. Empirical research is basically most of
Quantitative,
the time
yeah.
we do it, but qualitative, quantitative, both are instruments of empirical research. If you do
Yeah,
book study
absolutely.
and you do library work, that's not empirical. The rest is empirical. So most
Yeah,
of the time we mix both. We don't recognize it, but we are mixing empirical and
yeah,
uh, and library researches, because our contextual data comes from library research most of the time.
Yeah.
And the comment about IRB, yes, one of the biggest problem is to get mixed method instruments approved by IRB. That's I failed to mention that, but you should really work hard when you are going through the IRB, because they'll ask questions why I'm mixing. But if you are ready to answer the questions, it's good.
Absolutely, that's true. There's so many experiences that all of us can cite, which we went through our PhDs, which will be very pertinent to the questions asked. I think when you talk about grounded theory, I usually call it the framework that you develop. You do this literature, you engage with the literature, and you develop your own specific, unique framework that you're talking about.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
Yeah, and that I think is what is missing in most of the research that I read from PhD and MPhil. I see that they have not arrived. They're always quoting other people, but they have not arrived at their own framework in how they are going to conduct that research and what they are going to do. And it's always pick and that's also the literature review. Actually, Asif, who did the literature review, talks about engaging with the text, not stating the text. And I thought that's a beautiful way of talking about.
Yes, I came across grounded research when we did this virtual student exchange program. It was Stanford, Melbourne, and Peshawar, and we did 2 papers on that. And our colleague at Stanford, he said, we'll use grounded. I said, what is grounded research? I didn't know about it. And he said, it means that you already have the data, you have done your job, and we have the data, we have done it, we had planned for it, we have plans and everything, and we'll explain it after going through the data. I said, okay, let's do it. And we published it.
Yeah. And so from Fatma Jinnah, thank you. Sarish is thanking us. CUI is the ComSets University, Islamabad. And Sumaira Akram, you made a very good remark that research brings personal transformation. Absolutely.
That's true. That's very true.
Yeah. If you see our the introduction to this research course, we ascribe to the researcher development framework. And I give that diagram of a researcher development framework where we say that all aspects, and which includes the personal, are equally important in a research development program. So it's the development not only of your work, but also of you. And the supervisor has to be very mindful of that. We'll talk a bit about it in the last session. So we are very thankful to you and for your time. And Altaf, I really enjoyed your session.
Thank you.
Such a lot. There is some more messages. In most of the cases, experimentation design is used to test hypotheses, and it follows quantitative design. So okay, it's the words that you use, but the concept is the same. Thanks a lot. Thank you, Bahria University. Ittisam, thank you. Thanks a lot. Inspiring and refreshing. That is American University. So Al Ikhwan University, Ifrain, Morocco. Very inspiring and refreshing. I totally agree with you, Veronica. And thank you so much. It's Sumaira Akram and Dr. Altaf. Thanks for you. Thank you, Dr. Altaf. Rehana John. Zara again, ComSets. University, Islamabad, but this is a Sahiwal, I think, area. A fruitful session. Blessings to the speaker. Thank you, American University, Cairo, Mariam. Thank you for this excellent presentation. Namal, thank you. Ikra says, such a wonderful session. In a small time, you've made so many concepts more clear. Rehana, that's true for me too. Thanks, Dr. Saheb. It was very good, Atikur Rahman. And then you have your fan following at FCC, which doesn't stop. And I am one of the fans. Thank you so much for Isra University, Nabiha. Thank you so much. We are having these immense thanks and informative session, and we maintained over 130